It's
Okay, cool. So we're gonna start here. I'm gonna mute myself. And Ariel, I would wait about 30 seconds before I said hello because it takes some people just a little bit of time to transition over
not okay.
as we start. Okay, here we go.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Ariel Miller from Faith Communities Go Green. We're going to start in a minute or so. I'm very proud and delighted to introduce to you Brent Boyd, and we'll say more about him in a minute. This will give other people time to get into the webinar. Because it's a webinar, we don't have a chat function, so I just want to draw your attention to the Q&A button at the bottom, and as we go along, you're welcome to put your questions there. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Ariel Miller. I'm a member of the steering committee of Faith Communities Go Green, which is a nonprofit affiliate of Green Umbrella and Equation. And we have the first of our 2025 advocacy forums tonight. Our guest is Brent Boyd, who is the CEO of Solclusion and brings to us a tremendous range of experience in both business and the nonprofit sectors. In addition to being the CEO of Solclusion Energy in Cincinnati, he is the Chief Technology Officer for Global Energy Matters in Columbus and co-founder of Solar Power and Light in Miamisburg. He has worked over the last 40 years on projects throughout North America and Europe with business, educational institutions, nonprofits, and churches. And he has served on many nonprofit boards, sharing his experience as a volunteer and as a leader. He served on the Ohio State University Extension Service Board, Green Energy Ohio Board, and Drive Electric Dayton, which is going to be showcased at the Green Umbrella Midwest Regional Sustainability Summit early next month. Brent is a member of the Refreshing Springs Church of God in Westchester, and that is a solarized congregation. So that is a very visible and powerful witness of climate care and creation care. I'm very, very glad to introduce Brent now to talk to you about how to make the case for creation care as it applies to energy.
Thank you, Ariel. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So thank you, Ariel, and much gratitude to you and your team for allowing me to speak to your collective this evening. It's an honor and a pleasure. So you've asked me to talk about the subject of finding new paths for, initially you said green energy. That's not a typo, actually. I crossed out energy and substituted that with economic development. And I'll get into why I've done that a little bit later in the talk this evening. But finding new paths for green economic development in Ohio is the point that I'd like to discuss this evening. And feel free to ask questions as we go along. No need to wait until the end. Ariel will navigate that and manage that through the Q&A button. So she may decide to push some of the questions until the end, and questions that seem like hot questions that are relevant to what I'm talking about right now, she'll let them flow through, and we'll discuss them right here and there. With that, I'm not going to say a whole lot about Solclusion Energy Group, but a small advertisement plug, if you will. Solclusion is really the combination of almost 2 decades of work in sustainability and arguably a lifetime in entrepreneurship. Seclusion Energy Group, as the name suggests, is a group of companies and businesses. SCG Advisory is our boutique consultancy company that helps organizations in matters of project finance, funding their projects, understanding the return on investment in projects, design and development of their projects. And we've recently launched that business unit within Seclusion over the last few months. We've been developing that business unit for the last 6 to 9 months. Seclusion Development Alternatives is our development company that goes out and makes projects like you see on the screen here happen. We work with colleges, we work with cities, we work with commercial and industrial companies um, to figure out how to bring solar infrastructure and EV infrastructure to their campuses and their establishments. STEM Electrical Contractors actually is a wholly owned IBEW union electrical contract company that's under our umbrella as well. So all of the work that you see here on the right, you actually see some construction folks there working. Those are STEM folks. And so we actually self-perform these projects ourselves, along with a group of partners that is part of what we call our Seclusion Ecosystem Alliance, or our C. And so, having been doing this type of work for over a decade, what we found is that it's better to have friends and family that you work with to build things rather than looking for contractors that you don't know much about to help you with work. And so we formalized a program called our C, where we repeatedly work with the same folks that might have different skill sets than we have to get this type of construction work and development work done. And so some of these folks we've worked with for well over 10 years. We know their families, we know their businesses, we've watched them grow, they've watched us grow. And so that's our C. And so, in summary, we are a solar and EV charger infrastructure development company, solar and EV charger infrastructure construction company, and a solar and EV investment and advisory platform company. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about Seclusion Energy Group. So finding new paths for green energy, or green economic development, as the forum is called. I crossed out the word energy because this area of sustainability that we are all part of, the faith communities, Go Green and Seclusion Energy Group, we're much bigger than and broader than just green energy. We are actually helping people figure out how to bring economic development to their communities. We are dealing with sustainability issues, climate change issues, energy efficiency issues. We are creating sustainable futures, and we are attempting to bring equity and make everything we do equitable for the futures of others. And so it wouldn't give this justice just to kind of pigeonhole the conversation to green energy, and a lot of the dynamics, some of which I'll get into this evening, are broader than green energy, and they really, in most cases, the crux of things amounts to the money. And the money, in a more sophisticated term, is called economic development. And so this is going to be a little different kind of talk tonight. It's not going to be a tech talk. It's going to be more of somewhat of a philosophical conversation, and talking about some of the dynamics that we see in the marketplace that impact, in some cases, impact what we do favorably, and in cases, impact what we do unfavorably. So, Faith Communities Go Green has a mission statement, and I took an excerpt out of their mission statement that really fits well with the conversation tonight, and that is that the whole goal of Faith Community Go Green is to create more sustainable and equitable futures for all. And that's a pretty nice word, the future for all term, because that's broadly used in the work that we do in Drive Electric Dayton. We talk about EVs for all. The Biden administration created programming around an area called Solar for All. And in both cases, the the goal there is to create equitable exposure, outreach, and opportunities for everyone, whether you live in Brown County or Pike County, where we visited over the last few weeks, or whether we are in Trotwood, Ohio, or whether we're in Avondale, whether we're in downtown Cincinnati, or whether we're in Westchester. This space of sustainability and solar and EVs is something that, isn't commonplace throughout all. And so we want everyone to have an opportunity to participate in this area of sustainability and all that's encompassed in that. And so Future for All is very important. And I was excited to see and learn that Faith Communities has that as their key mission statement. And so I'll be talking more about that as we proceed. Ariel and I had coffee about 2 months ago, and she asked a question about um, sometimes the challenge of getting through to people when you talk squarely with them or at them about green energy or sustainability. Some people don't respond well. Some people reject. Some people deflect and defend. Some people just don't believe it. Some people call it hogwash. And I said to Ariel, there's probably a better way. We've learned through um, cutting our teeth that there's two ways to talk to people about the space that we love, that we operate in. And I coined a phrase or a term, and I called it, green plus green, or green versus green. And so we ended up with a phrase called the case for green versus green, or green versus green case. And so what that means is that different people prioritize how they think about our space, either around, you know, colloquially what we hear as the Green New Deal, and colloquially what we are now beginning to hear related to drill baby drill. And whether you like it or not, people believe what they believe, whether it's true or not. And based on what people believe, it then sets what their priorities are. So if you're speaking with someone who believes drill baby drill, and you come at them from the standpoint of a Green New Deal perspective, they might get hostile. They might get in your face. They might call you a liar. They might say, I don't believe it. But if you talk about money with folks, there's virtually nobody that will disagree with you about, help me figure out how I can bring more dollars, more economic development to my family or to my community. And so therein lies the sort of duplicitous green versus green, um, green energy versus greenbacks. I hate the term and what I hear in the press and the newspaper when people say the American people have given me a mandate. That's circular reasoning, in my opinion, because oftentimes people are repeating what they've heard, whether they really understand the facts or not. And then that starts to set their opinions and their beliefs of things. And so at that point, you're not going to change folks' opinion, whether what they say or what you say to them at all. I have a neighbor. We've been neighbors for 20 years. And he believes that solar emits emissions. He believes that solar panels don't work. He says, well, uh, I don't know why anyone would do that. And there's nothing I'm going to do to change his mind about that. He definitely believes in drill, baby, drill. But we're great neighbors. He has my phone number. I have his phone number. If things come up, we call each other. We speak. We know each other's family. We know when our families are sick. We're great friends. We just have different opinions of things. But if I'm going to impact him, I've got to talk about the dollars and not the Green New Deal or the sustainability aspects of things. And so, to kind of summarize that point, you have to know who your audience is. Your messaging must appeal to the audience that you're addressing. And folks have priorities. Some folks' priorities are based on sustainability. Some folks' priorities are based on economic development, reducing costs. And then you have a blend of two. You're right. Some people may be 50-50, some people may be 70-30. But in general, everybody is motivated by saving money. Now, there are some people who don't care about saving money. I have a friend who pays more than he has to for the electricity to power his home because he tells the utility company, I want your version that gets me green energy. I want you to pump energy into my home that's being generated from either a hydro plant or a solar plant or a wind plant. And you can do that. Most citizens in the Duke Energy territory or the AES territory can buy a rate plan that assures that the energy that they're buying comes from green sources, and you'll pay more for that. So in that case, it's sort of the opposite. You don't care that you're paying a premium for energy because your priorities are more geared towards sustainability, the environment. And so the key point here and finding new pathways is to figure out what motivates people. And oftentimes you've got to do that before you start talking to them so you don't lose them out of the gate. And so the messaging is really important. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. But you notice the pegboard there with round pegs and square pegs. You cannot fit a square peg in a round hole. We learned that with solar investors a decade ago. Folks with money want to invest in what they want to invest in, and you're not going to convince them otherwise. And when we learned that lesson, we did well with regard to bringing investment dollars to solar development. But until we learned that, we ran into brick walls. We cut our teeth. The next area that I want to talk about, and this is, I'm trying to get rid of this little screen there. Won't go away. Oh, there it is. Okay, it went away. Okay. I thought I was being new and novel when I thought of a term called friends and family. And then I said to myself, let me throw the title doctrine on it because there is a methodology and a belief and a way of operating that's kind of friends and family-ish oriented. That's a word that's kind of been around for decades, probably made popular and commonplace by the television show called Friends. But I Googled the term friends and family doctrine, and sure enough, it was a thing. I'm not the creator. I thought I created something, but I didn't. But it still applies. The friend and family doctrine was actually something coined and created by the Quakers, George Fox in the 17th century. And it refers to a concept that emphasizes the importance of faith in each other and individuals and the power of inward guidance. And in essence, the family and friend doctrine is a means of honoring close relationships and with those close relationships, supporting those relationships, holding those relationships accountable within various contexts. And the friends and family doctrine, as I'd like to use it and describe it, is sort of like you regard your friends and family. I had a surprise party last week, or I did. My wife did it for me. I turned 60 on last week, and she had a surprise party. And it was a room full of men, my inner circle of folks that I've known for, in some cases, decades. And they were friends and family. We talk about things in a similar fashion. That doesn't mean that we all agree on everything, but the way you can align people to talk about things in a similar fashion, assuming that you believe a matter, is through common talking points, through having guiding principles like faith um, faith communities. They have a list of principles, guiding principles on their website. I read them today, pondered them. Friends and families work together. We go out and do things. We go get our friends and families. If they are stuck on the side of a road, we go get them. We go help them. If we think that they have isolated themselves. We go get them. We help them. We support them. We invest in them. If they need financial assistance, we help them. We give it to them. And in most cases, without any hope of getting those dollars back. That's not why we do it. We do it because they're friends and families, because we like them, we protect them, we love them. We reward them for good behavior. When I wasn't a rebellious kid, and my dad told me, the reason we do what we do for you is because you're a good kid. You respect us. You honor us. So we reward good behavior for our friends and family in a similar fashion. We hold each other accountable. In some cases, in the context of friends and families, we show tough love if we have to. We divest ourselves is one form of showing tough love. And in some cases, you've got to let a friend or family member kind of go off uh, their own way, a prodigal child. In extreme cases, you may have to sever relationships with folks because they're hurting or damaging the family, and you've got to let that relationship go with the hopes that one day things will be different. And that's what I mean by divest. Ariel asked me a question today as we were kind of going over the slides, and she said something like, aren't we to protect all our friends because that's what we morally do as Christians? And I said, well, there's two different types of friend groups and family groups. There's the child of God family group where everyone is a child of God that believes in God. And yeah, we have a moral obligation to treat and love our neighbor. But I'm not talking about God's children. I'm talking about our relationships that relate to the realm that we operate in with regard to sustainability, with regard to the businesses that we run, with regard to the organizations that we run, with regard to uh, drill baby drill versus the green economy, the new Green Deal. Those are two different families that are distinctly different families that distinctly do things to well, and generally we don't seek to hurt folks in the Green New Deal family or the green energy or sustainability family, but I can tell you that it seems like the other families that generally have more of a belief in drill baby drill, they they seek to hurt us. They seek to potentially put our jobs at risk, which undoubtedly will hurt our families. And so wanted to make that clarification and that distinction that, yeah, we may have to do things that might seem counter to our Christian family, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we've got to show families that oppose us tough love. And in some cases, we have to divest ourselves from those other families. And we have to do things that might result in those families um, having challenges with trying to continue to put forth their beliefs with regard to sustainability and green energy and all of the things that we believe in. Some examples of friends and family doctrine in action. Our administration makes no bones about operating on certain promises that support the drill baby drill belief. You know, the administration plans to boost fossil fuel production and reverse climate policies and regulations aimed at reducing U.S. carbon emissions. We do what we do to protect those things, but everyone isn't of the same mindset that that's important and that those things should be protected. There's more of a belief that the economics of drill baby drill outweigh anything else. And as a result, I'm going to do things that help my family that has a similar belief. Um, and uh, and what I mentioned that I'm in the process of reading the book Internal Combustion. There are times when the opposite or opposition doesn't necessarily believe, for instance, drill baby drill, but the economics of it make more sense to them than the Green New Deal. So therefore, I'm going to go with that because I can become richer. So gets to a matter of greed. So sometimes families operate from a doctrine of greed. Um, we saw in some of the recent actions against Elon Musk a coalescence of friends and family, right? You have folks that divested their stock. I was speaking to someone yesterday that said they divested their stock holdings within Tesla. Right. If you own stock in Tesla, then you believe in Tesla, you're part of their friend and family group. And so by divesting, you've separated yourself from that friend and that family group. You have other people that have protested and demonstrated against Tesla. They, in a lot of cases, don't own Teslas, they don't have stock. So they fall more into a friend category where they want to be a part of the family group that will oppose folks that used to be family within Tesla. And so we see these things, we see this friends and family doctrine um, position uh, in real time happening today to sort of um, support what I'm saying about the friends and family doctrine. So, how do we take a similar fashion with folks that are really taking action based on how they feel about their friends and family from the standpoint of their, whether you believe in drill baby drill, whether you believe in the Green New Deal? How do we take action as folks being more inclined to support sustainability? Well, we need to take care of our family and our friends, those that are like minded. We need to consider building collaborations with folks, whether they be legislatures who support our causes. We need to invest in our legislatures' campaigns that support our causes. We need to invest in their communities, in their programming. We need to divest and avoid investment with those legislatures, organizations, and businesses that weaken or oppose our causes. I'm still sort of formulating my thinking in this area because can be a slippery slope. Um, because there might be collateral damage in taking these kinds of actions where we divest and hold back investment and remove investment from folks that we deem not to be our friends and family. So we've got to, I think, continue this conversation to make certain that what I'm saying is sound and that there are ways to do this that minimize the collateral damage. I had breakfast with a gentleman a few weeks ago that expressed his opinion about the Target boycotts. I don't see the things that are happening to Target with regard to the quote unquote boycotts as a boycott. I see that simply as not supporting a friend or family that has decided that they want to do something and go a different direction. Why support friends and families that have decided that they don't want to continue being or having a posture of being a friend and family? That's not a boycott. That's just you deciding where you invest your energy, your money, your time. And it's not something that you do for a few days or a few weeks or a few months. It's something that you sort of say to yourself, you know what? I decided I want to go a different way. I want to invest in those things, those businesses, those organizations that support me and my family and friends.
Let me
Building
just
stronger
interrupt.
alliances
A good
and
example of
investing.
that A good
Yes.
example of that in our group would be discussions over what banks to use for our banking. And a number of organizations I've been part of have chosen banks that don't invest in fossil fuels. Would that be an example?
Well, absolutely. To the extent that you deem banks that don't invest in fossil fuels to be like-minded around your beliefs and what you're doing, then absolutely you have adopted them as part of your friends and family, and you've decided that you want to invest in the family. Absolutely. That doesn't mean that the banks that you've divested from are bad people. It just means that you want to put your money in things that support what you believe in. That's not a strange that's not a strange thing to do. That's our normal way of operating in general. Absolutely. Building stronger alliances, uh, innovating with friends and families. Ariel and faith communities, we're trying to figure out how we can begin to innovate together given our new relationship. There are a lot of collaborations already at work with faith communities and the partners that you all have and work together with, like Green Umbrella and like I think it's Equation. It looks like a play on words, but I think it's pronounced Equation.
Yeah.
You all are already partners, friends and family. Figure out how to innovate better together as friends and family because you know that you all are going to have your own best interests in mind or your collective, the best interests of the collective and your friend and family group. So it just makes sense. One example, Green Umbrella and Drive Electric Dayton and Faith Communities are new friends. They've connected over the last 30 days. And now Drive Electric Dayton is going to showcase a fleet of cars at the Green Umbrella Midwest Sustainability Conference in a few weeks. There's an example of collaboration. We do this, Drive Electric Dayton does this all over the state of Ohio. We go into Pike County and Brown County and downtown Dayton, and now we're focused on Cincinnati, working with the Drive Electric Cincinnati chapter. We've been very successful. We've allowed folks that might otherwise never see, touch, drive an electric car have that experience. And we're bringing that experience to Green Umbrella's sustainability conference in a few weeks. And so there's an example of the friends and family doctrine in action. There was another question that was posed to me in putting together this conversation, and that is how do we get to or find influential supporters of our work? One of the things that we have seen with influential folks is they're looking for ways to help folks that are less fortunate or folks that may not have quite as big of a balance sheet as they do. Folks seem timid and scared to approach such folks. Everyone isn't, but influential supporters are out there. We have to identify them and know who they are in our region, in Ohio. I've categorized some of the influential supporters of our cause, our belief. There are renewable investors in Ohio that are literally investing billions of dollars in Ohio. You may not know this, but 100 plus megawatt solar farms are being built all throughout Ohio, and they have been for probably 3 to 5 years now. And companies like TED Renewables, Invenergy is the largest energy developer in renewables and natural gas in the country based out of Chicago. They're in Ohio building massive solar farms. Open Roads Renewables is another company. We know for a fact, or I know for a fact, that some of these companies are funding efforts of nonprofits in Ohio to further the cause of sustainability, green energy, all of the things that we believe in. And all it took was just a phone call to say, hey, will you help? We'd like to do this or we'd like to do that. We'd like to put EV chargers at this nonprofit and they can't afford it themselves. Would you donate the funds to do this? They're investing in these communities. They're looking for things to create goodwill in the communities that they're investing in. And so they are more than happy to help fund those kinds of projects. Environmental organizations, there are a lot of us out here like faith communities. You've got Blacks in Green, you've got Green Umbrella, you've got the Black Environmental Leaders in Cleveland, you've got Drive Electric Dayton, you've got the Foundation for Appalachian in Ohio. I met these folks maybe 6 years ago. They're impressive. They manage money of other foundations that are targeted towards the Appalachian areas of Ohio. And they'd love to know some of us here in Southwest Ohio that are looking for partners to do what we do throughout the state in Appalachia. in the Appalachian areas. So environmental groups, some are more influential than others. You'd be surprised. Foundation for Appalachian Ohio, or FAO, they're very influential. They've got a pretty big balance sheet as well. Corporate partners, the likes of Duke Energy Foundation. Duke Energy Foundation, they're a $1 billion public company. They have a foundation. They will help. Again, when you approach them, you've got to be mindful of your messaging. You've got to know, you know, study them a little bit to know what, what their initiatives are, what their beliefs are, what their investment, what are they investing in already, so that you don't, go at them with a message that might not resonate. And so, and that, that relates to all of these types of influential supporters. You've got to be mindful of your messaging. Cross-functional industries. Um, one of the reasons why I somewhat changed the name of the title away from green energy to green economic development is because we've got to think about cross-functional industries across industries, not just electric vehicles, not just solar, not just energy efficiency, not just greenhouse gas companies directly. You may be in an industry or a space that only focuses on one of these areas. You're kind of in your own silo, but we've got to broaden our family and friends collaborations and relationships. And folks in some of these silos like EVs and solar, they've got big balance sheets. ChargePoint, Electrify America, they have big balance sheets and they're EV players, and they are looking for ways to impact the communities that they either are already in or the communities that they'd like to be a part of. And so I hope that gets at the question or one of the charges that I was given to determine how we can be better friends with influential supporters.
And Brent, I'd like to go back to the previous issue of using our buying power. One of our participants tonight wanted to know what's the difference between what you're recommending and a boycott. We're talking
we
about
don't boycott. We don't boycott our families, or we don't boycott our friends. We either are gonna help our friends or we're not going to help them. We don't generally say that we're going to boycott our friend. We use terms like we're going to go on a vacation together. We're going to have a cookout together. We're going to do this together. Or you have folks in your neighborhood that you've never met. You probably aren't going to make a big effort to meet. They're not in your friends and family group. So a boycott is more of an activist type of mindset and approach. Friends and family doctrine is deciding that I'm going to work with, invest my time, my energy, my money with my friends and my family, and not those that have positioned themselves to not be my friend and my family. That would be the difference. I don't know if that helps, but that's the difference in my mind. One is more of an activist approach, and one is more of a lifestyle approach.
And there's one more question that came up in terms of the potential support, financial supporters. This question says, is there a range in the amount investors would fund? Can you provide a minimum and maximum based on your experience?
I don't, we're getting thousands of dollars from some of these folks. We're getting hundreds of dollars. It depends on what it is you're trying to do and how it resonates with who you're going to. Sometimes you have to go out and get a coalition of influential supporters. It's not going to all come from one. Mm-hmm. And you've got to, and it's got to be well thought out. You don't approach influential people with half-baked ideas. So you've got to show them that that once they give you this money, you can put it to action. You're not going to sit on it for a year or two before it gets deployed. So you've got to have a plan, that impacts the community, and you go to work and start making some phone calls and appealing to folks. And so I don't think there's necessarily a limit to what you can achieve. You've got to kind of understand the balance sheet of who you're going to and what their capacity is to invest, and in some cases, like the Duke Energy Foundation, you can look at what they've invested in and how much they've invested in over the years and know that, okay, they're gonna, they're gonna, they're a donor that might give ten to $20,000 and not 50 to 100. So you've got to kind of look at what they've already done to kind of formulate your strategy. But I don't think, I think the sky's the limit. You've got to have a thought out strategy.
Right.
When you think about renewable energy investors in Ohio that are investing literally billions in Ohio, they've got some pretty big balance sheets. And they're trying to sway community opinion because some communities don't want their billions.
Mm-hmm.
They're telling them no. Their yard signs have the word solar and a circle and a cross through that say no solar here.
Mm-hmm.
Any more there, Ariel, for now?
Not at the moment. No, thank you.
Okay, sure. One idea that we thought of, and we're kind of in the middle, our SCG advisory company is in the middle of helping a $50+ million manufacturer here in the Cincinnati metro area that wants to green up their operation. And we thought we were going to do a greenhouse gas advisory session with them. But what they decided is that, we're going to crawl before we walk. And what we want to do now is we want to buy some RECs to green up our emissions and to start to approach net zero. And they just signed a contract with us to go out and find enough RECs for them to offset 20% of their emissions.
And that stands
so
for renewable energy credit, right?
Yes,
Okay.
REC stand for renewable energy credit. So every 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy equates to one SREC, or I should say, every 1,000 kilowatt hour of clean energy or green energy equals one REC.
Mm-hmm.
And RECs can be sold in the carbon market. Right now, Ohio's carbon market, based on the legislature in Ohio, is very depressed at around $5 to $10 on a good day, and on a bad day, $3. The Pennsylvania market is a much more liquid market. RECs in Pennsylvania can be sold for $25 to $35. Places like New Jersey, DC, hundreds of dollars per REC. But our RECs that are generated in Ohio can't be sold into anywhere else other than Ohio or Pennsylvania. And so there are projects out there that are looking to sell their RECs to either utility companies or others on the market that would buy their RECs. And there are companies that are REC brokers that will go out and find someone that might buy your REC and enter into a 1 or 2 or 3 year contract with that individual to buy RECs. But if you're in Ohio, your only option to maximize the value in your RECs are to sell them into the PA market. So I thought to myself, there are a lot of folks on this call that represent, their household or their congregations, and maybe they're not going to put a solar array on their church building to offset their energy costs and to create RECs that will lower their carbon footprint. So why not buy RECs as a faith community, whether you're a member, a person, a church, from projects that are looking for outlets to sell their RECs. And so instead of those projects selling their RECs into Pennsylvania, why not create a market for them through the faith community to be able to sell their RECs right here in Ohio at a reasonable price? So you may not necessarily buy them at $35 or $25, but certainly I would encourage the faith communities to do better than $3 to $5 to $10. So maybe somewhere in the middle, like they're $20. And so if you do this, if you create a consortium of faith community folks that collaborate together to say, we want to buy a total of maybe 50 megawatts of RECs then that's going to support 50 megawatts of projects in Ohio. I don't think you want to support a 150 megawatt project because folks that are building projects that large, they've got means to, do better for themselves. I'm talking about the small guy that might have trouble, you know, with getting its project off the ground, a 100 kW project or a 500 kW project.
Oh my
Those
goodness, you've just
projects.
given me an idea. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm
Oh,
thinking
no, no, no.
the effort to put solar panels on habitat houses. Um, it wouldn't even really be through Rex. The churches could finance solar panels on habitat houses or other affordable housing
Absolutely.
to offset their
Community
emissions.
solar was shot down with House Bill 15 that was just put into law a few weeks ago. This is kind of like a type of community solar effort where you form a collective to subscribe or buy into a group buy of Recs, absolutely, to support projects that otherwise may not have enough money to get their projects off the ground. So for instance, we are talking to a church and they consume about 60,000 kilowatt hours of energy a year. And to take their entire church off to net zero, they'd only need to buy 60 RECs um, at a price of about $20 to $25. That's $1,500 to $2,000 a year. So with a $1,500 to $2,000 a year investment, a church that consumes 60,000 kilowatt hours of energy a year can then claim and have a net zero operation. That's the benefit of it. That's what, as faith communities go green are trying to do. They're trying to figure out how can we get to net zero. So this is an idea on how, we might do that. And we'd be happy to help faith community go green, put a program like this together. And literally, we just hatched this idea over the last 2 days. So this is
Well,
right off the drawing board, so to speak.
I need to go back to a question that was posed by Patricia a little while ago. She was talking about the powerful financial or business interests that are investing in renewable energy in Ohio, and she's wondering if any of them have political action groups that are very influential, like those that support the MAGA initiative.
They do most every well balance sheet solar investor. They don't call themselves political action groups. They have policy executives within their company that is at the state house in Washington in the communities advocating for their companies and sustainability. So absolutely, most any large company and for certain Invenergy, TED Renewables, Open Roads Renewables, they have policy folks that their 100% of their effort is in what you're asking, and they're
And,
easy to find.
okay, good. So maybe we could develop a directory a little bit, or how we find them. We could publicize that to the group. Mimi
Absolutely.
adds another comment. She brings up agrovoltaic um, projects, and I wonder if we could facilitate some of those under the same idea with your consortium to buy Rex.
Oh, absolutely. We've been studying agrivoltaics for a year. We actually there's going to be a conference in Chicago in August, the annual Solar Farm Summit that focuses on agrivoltaics. So absolutely. And Ariel, before this call kicked off, you and I were talking about the rural land ideologies around some folks believe that as a landowner, I should be able to do what I like to do with my land. And then the other side of the coin says, well, farmland should only be used for farming. So if you try to bring solar to our county, we're going to vote it down, which the Ohio Power Siting Board and House Bill 52 allows townships and communities to do now. And so agrivoltaics, interestingly, addresses both ideologies. It allows you to continue to farm the land while you create a second revenue stream from solar. So you're literally either raising the solar panels or spreading the solar panels further apart so that you can continue to grow on the land and produce clean energy. Some farmers call that innovation money or innovation revenue because it gives them money to do things in their farm operation where they previously couldn't do because they didn't have the money to do it. So, so farmers, when they learn about agrivoltaics, they love the idea, and the policymakers and the legislators like it as well. Okay. So the next concept, so we've talked about the friends and family doctrine. We've talked a little bit about forget what my first topic was. But my last topic that I want to talk about, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I thought that this faith community would appreciate that tagline because it
Yeah, definitely.
comes out of the Bible. And, as I read Internal Combustion by Edwin Black, it amazed me how the love of money is the root of all evil has driven energy transition over centuries. This book talks about the wood cartels in the 14th century that
Mhm.
seized control of countries just to get access to the wood so that they could use the wood to make weapons. Weapons of the day then were steel things, swords and contraptions that were metal. And you needed a hot fire to make those things, and wood, you had to control the wood because he who controls the fuel can win the war. Sounds very similar to oil. Well, oil didn't coin that playbook. The wood folks did in the 14th century, and it lasted until the next fuel source hit the scene, in the 20th century, and initially in the 19th century with the discovery of oil and then coal, and now renewables, right? And so when you look at the dynamics of what money will cause people to do um, in the 14th century, they're still doing the same thing. They still behave the same way. Nothing's new under the sun, as the Bible says. And so when I look at what's happening in the renewable space, even today, the assault on our industry with, the potential to repeal and roll back the investment tax credit and to remove the electric vehicle credits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is this behavior is no different than the behaviors in the 14th through 19th and 20th centuries. The wood folks fought to the end to prevent oil and coal to take hold. You know, there are accounts where people turned up missing because they were getting too influential with oil, and the wood folks wanted to control and keep their cartels and their money as long as they could.
Yeah.
So nothing surprises me when I learn about the history um, as to what could happen in today's time with regard to, is the legislature going to be successful? It's bigger than the legislature. There's a lot of players that work together to maintain their monopolies, to maintain their cartels. And I thought a cartel had to do with just the drug folks, but the word cartel was not coined by the drug folks. It was coined by the wood guys back in the 14th century. There were wood cartels.
Yeah. Well, I come from New England and would always read about the Cabots and the lodges, and they made their money as a drug dealing and slave trading cartel.
Yeah,
First slaves and then opium. Slaves and what? Rum and then opium. There has been a
absolutely.
request. Can you adjust your camera? Because people want to be able to see you as you're doing your thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have
That's
two screens
wonderful.
here and I forgot that
Oh, that's wonderful. And then
is that
uh,
better?
it's perfect. And Ken
Yeah.
um, added a comment about the the line that solar is destroying farmland, or that farmland is being sacrificed to solar. He says, don't we lose far more land to development, houses or commercial, than we do to solar? Yet we never hear about folks banning commercial development.
Absolutely. So what does that tell you? That tells you that this is more about the this is more about a technology transition than it is about the land, right? There are playbooks. Believe it or not, there's a playbook for communities that want to oppose solar to say the exact thing, the right things to spread within like-minded people or their friends and family that don't want solar in their community. The fossil fuel folks arm them with the playbook to counter the renewables. That's the circular reasoning that I talked about. Folks, in some instances, don't even realize why they're doing what they're doing. They're being manipulated, right? That's why this slide here says the history of society's dependence on energy is a chronicle of monopolies, manipulation, merciless profiteering. It's all convoluted, and people are pawns, right? There are many rural communities that could rise out of poverty because some of these 100, 2 million, $200 million projects are going to pump tens of millions of dollars in their communities through tax revenues. But folks in these communities are being manipulated, and they are voting against letting these things come into their communities.
On that note, there is some hope, because the next person who's going to be speaking in this series, probably in July, is a community organizer for Ohio Citizen Action. And she has been, with her team, canvassing rural counties and finding out what kind of framing will really disarm people that she's talking to there who have heard some of this messaging you're talking about, and get them to see that solar energy could really be a boon to their communities. So stay tuned for that, because we're going to build on this point that you're making about the pernicious, the way people are harmed by this misinformation in their financial well-being and in their economic development.
Absolutely. And, to some degree, I'm okay if a community decides they don't want it in their community, right? I love Summit Park in Blue Ash, and they're talking about putting a high school baseball stadium there. And I'm like, I don't think that will look right there. I think that will disrupt the community, right? You should be okay having an opinion about things, but your opinion should be based on the truth and not a lie, right? It, it's the lie that causes you to make a decision and formulate opinions that are erroneous. That's the problem. And so this hierarchy of power, capitalism, monopolies, cartels, and even legislatures that want to appease the monopolies and the power group, you know, that's the problem. But that's not going to go away. If it were going to go away, it would have gone away hundreds of years ago, and it hasn't. And so, history repeats itself, right? And so we've got to figure out as a faith community, how do we do things different? I think that's one of the reasons of new paths. How can we create new paths? Because folks in these communities know that they're turning away millions of dollars to empower their communities, but they don't care. So I don't know what the answer is yet. But what I know is we're wrestling against, I love the scripture we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're not wrestling against the obvious. We're wrestling against strongholds that have been in existence for decades, for centuries. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to think about this differently. And I don't have all the answers, but I collectively as friends and families, let's get together and figure it out. Mm-hmm. Why? To create a more sustainable and equitable future for all. That's what Faith Community Go Green believes in its mission statement, and that's what we're charged to figure out together. What does that lead to? It leads to freedom. A liberation from those who want to suppress others. And it's not the folks in rural America or urban America that's trying to suppress anyone. It's the hierarchy, the one percenters, and in some cases, well, in all cases, the monopolies and cartels, they're looking to keep certain people at bay so that they can keep their money and their power.
Mhm.
I had the distinction of meeting Ben Crump a few years ago at a national organization of Black County Commissioners, and he was the keynote speaker, and he talked about this concept of economic freedom. And as I read more about Faith Community Go Green's guiding principles, um, one of your guiding principles says that, and this little thing is blocking the words, but we utilize a system of maintaining a holistic long-term view of the full system rather than focusing on parts of it.
Mhm.
And economic freedom can result in doing just that which your guiding principle states. You know, Ben Crump said that economic freedom leads to all other freedoms, and the lack thereof is an impediment to all of these other freedoms.
Mhm.
So his solution, his recommendation is be at the table. I think Faith Go Green does a great job at that by being at the table with the legislatures. We've got to be at other tables as well. Ignorance is bliss, is not bliss. I'm sorry. Ignorance is not bliss. A lot of the folks wanting to continue with their incumbency positions and their stranded assets want to keep folks ignorant, want to make people believe that solar panels emit radiation, that solar panel inverters are loud. We had to defend ourselves at a zoning commission meeting 10 years ago, and they told us that, wow, aren't those inverters going to be loud and disrupt the neighborhood? And we had to pay a professional engineer to prove that the decibel level of a inverter was lower than the air conditioner on your house. So ignorance is not bliss, but that's part of the playbook.
I
He
rode
said
my
you got to be
bicycle around.
unapologetic.
I rode my bicycle around a wind turbine in Illinois, and I was right under the wind turbine, and I really couldn't hear very much. And yet, people say that it's tremendously noisy, and I really have pretty good ears. Mimi says, "What about those data centers going up everywhere? How do they do on noise?" Well, she doesn't
Absolutely.
ask about noise, but what about the data centers?
Are you asking me about data
Yeah.
centers?
Yes.
So, data centers, what's your question about data centers?
Well, maybe Mimi will clarify. She says, "What about those data centers going up everywhere? Might have to do with the nuisance of noise and energy consumption."
I can only speak to energy consumption. I don't know about the noise of data centers in communities. I've not read about that and have not been close to them, but they are energy hogs, right? And you know, data centers are driving AI, and AI is a priority of the administration. And so data centers are coming, and you know, energy beware. It'll get figured out when it gets figured out. But one of the things you have to do, data centers take a long time to get sited. They could take 5 to 10 years because they've got to deal with the energy aspect of how they're going to get powered. And oftentimes it requires upgrades to the energy infrastructure, and that doesn't happen overnight. And so, but data centers are here to stay because AI and these types of things and cryptocurrency is here to stay. That is in and of its own right a technology revolution. So that's like saying, what about, 20 years ago? I hate these little cell phones, but they came and now they're really small. So this technology is not going to stop coming. And so it's something that's we've got to deal with. And, that speaks to the need for more renewable energy to power these things, more wind, more solar,
Yeah.
more energy efficiency in our homes and businesses to lessen the burden on the grid. But no, it's a problem, and it's not going to stop. So we've got to figure it out.
We have
We've
a
got to be at the table.
we have a wonderful question from Becca. If you want to offset your home energy usage, will it be better to go to a company that claims 100% renewable energy and pay them a higher kilowatt hour cost? Or is it better to buy the RECs? Or is it even better to fund a small nonprofit solar project? The company that claims to be 100% renewable may be just buying the RECs instead of actually having renewable energy generation.
So there are companies, and we work with them that will make certain that you can buy certified RECs and get the chain of custody with the documents to show that. And you can the cheapest kind of RECs that you can buy to green up your home if that's what you want to do. And that's probably the cheapest way to do it is to buy RECs. You can buy hydro RECs or wind RECs or solar RECs. The company that we're doing this for now are going to be buying solar RECs, which are a little bit more expensive than wind and hydro RECs, but that's our recommendation to them because we think that's a better statement for them to be making. Um, they're going to be buying RECs for between $2 and $3 to green up their operation. And so it the cheapest route is to buy the hydro RECs or the wind RECs. If you want to support a local project, it's going to be more expensive. Uh, Anywhere from 3 to 5 to $20 to $30. Now, not $20 to $30 if you're buying Ohio Rex because that's not where the market is. But if Faith Communities puts a program together, my recommendation would be to, you know, price it somewhere between 20 and 30, and 20 and $25 so that you are making a meaningful investment with the projects that need the money. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, but
Well, it does get it. Going back to the case study of the business you were working with that originally wanted to reduce their emissions, and then they decided they weren't going to invest in that, but they were going to offset their emissions, right? So,
yes.
so it kind of has to do with uh, a kind of a spectrum from greenwashing to integrity. Does that make sense?
Sure. I wouldn't necessarily use the word integrity because even to start the conversation of ESG kind of suggests that you want to crawl before you walk.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people running in the opposite direction with regard to ESG and sustainability. So I commend folks that still want to
Yeah.
engage and do something. So it all gets down to the economics, frankly, putting solar on your roof, spending $1 million to do that versus spending a few $1,000s. That's a wide investment range to have to consider and to get support for from your executives and your board.
Mm-hmm. Ken asks a question. He says, or makes a comment. The problem with many green electricity suppliers is that they are using old existing sources instead of promoting new development.
Oh, absolutely. So when you work with a firm like we work with, they can supply you with 3 to 5 year old RECs, or they can supply you with 1 year old RECs for projects that were built last year, or they can sell you 2025 RECs, but you have to wait for them. You wouldn't be able to buy a 2025 REC until towards the end of 2025. Because projects have to mint them, right? They've got to generate and produce the RECs. And there's a process that a solar facility has to go through before their RECs get recognized on the certifying platform.
Right.
Okay. Uh, and so that brings me to the end of the conversation this evening. What I've got here is just a summary of kind of what we've spoken about. And I didn't draw attention to the arrows before I had the arrows in the beginning, but finding new paths are not always going to be a straight path. It's going to be a very um, sort of potpourri of possible things. It's going to be pivoting, it's going to be making a U-turn, it's going to be like what we call in the solar industry the solar coaster. That zigzag kind of looks like the solar coaster to me. The arrow with the line in front of it's like a roadblock. And so finding new paths are going to encounter all of these kinds of dynamics, and we just have to be resilient and work through them and know that in this space that we're all in, it's never going to just be a straight line. I kind of know that for a fact. At least I haven't experienced that in 15 years that I've been in this space. Straight lines last for a little bit, but then they start to get curvy and zigzaggy, and you have to stick with it and be patient. So, let's be workers together. The Bible talks about being workers together, and as a faith community, let's be workers together. Let's understand our messaging around green versus green goals. Let's really double down and figure out this friends and family focus where we can reward our friends and our families and not reward those who are positioning themselves against us. Um, and lastly, all of our efforts are to achieve a more equitable future for all, for our friends, our families, and even folks that we don't know yet, like the folks and the kids we visited in Brown County and Pike County. You wouldn't believe one of the teachers said to us, "Thank you for allowing our kids to have this experience." Some of these kids have never seen an electric car in Pike County. And so that's what a more equitable future looks like. It's showing kids in Brown County and Pike County what we know and what we do.
I really appreciate your coming tonight and sharing your spiritual perspective. Oh, good. There was a question about the energy bill, so do go ahead and talk about some of the things in the energy bill.
Yeah, I didn't know if we wanted to get into that or not, but I had a few slides to kind of summarize it if we wanted to.
Yes.
So, as many may know, House Bill 15 and Senate Bill 2 were passed at the beginning of May. Community solar pilot did not make it. It was a shenanigan that happened at the 11th hour. And, it's funny. I started working with some of those large investors 4 years ago, finding land for them with the hopes that community solar would pass in Ohio. About a year and a half ago, I stopped talking about community solar because there was too many zigzags.
Mhm.
And I said to those investors, I don't think this is a time for us to continue taking your money,
Mhm.
taking up land positions for community solar because I don't know if it'll ever happen.
Mhm.
So that was probably a good call
Mhm.
because it didn't make it into House Bill 15. Tax reform was made, actually is being more favorable for our industry, for the solar industry, renewable energy. The pilot, which stands for payment in lieu of tax, is a special property tax exemption for solar projects to pay sort of a progressive tax to avoid paying full property tax. And so this new reform has even decreased and has provided alternatives to the pilot that require less amount of payments for renewables. So that was a win for us. Priority investment areas is a new one that was voted in. Priority investment areas with regard to brownfields and other contaminated sites that now can access money for remediation and get favorable tax treatment for projects that are sited on those types of properties. So that made it in. Uh, the repeal on all coal subsidies have stopped. House Bill 6 was a major thing back in 2019 that brought all of the coal subsidies and nuclear I'm sorry, and the nuclear subsidies. So all of those things were repealed. Some of the monies that were in the limited solar subsidy legislation, while that those subsidies are being rolled back, they created a school energy performance loan fund, and the leftover money in the solar subsidy fund is going to go into that fund, and they're going to continue to fund that. So the Ohio Facilities Commission will be the administrators of that money, so that will make it easier for schools to be able to afford solar on their buildings. The electric security plan is going away. I hated that because, a utility bill has 10, 20, 30 tariffs in it. And this was always a tariff that was in a utility bill that artificially made it tough for solar to compete against the utility rate. Because it was always KW based or it was percentage based. It wasn't KWH based, so we could never impact it by solar. So that's going away. The Ohio Power Siting Board is now required to complete all of its cases in 150 days. I don't recall what it used to be, but it might not have had a limit.
Yeah, I think it could drag on and on and on.
Yeah, yep. Based on legislators and counties and townships kind of doing what they do to delay investment. Expanding opportunities behind the meter, mercantile accounts fall into that category. So very large operators, very large factories have more flexibility to bring solar and wind to their properties. In some cases, by siting the solar on different parcels that maybe they own that are not where the factory is. And that's a biggie, I think, for factories, because you may have land a mile or two away that's not where your factory is. Now you can, in some cases, put solar on that land to power your factory. And then this last one may not mean a whole lot to the layperson, but capacity maps are published maps by the utility companies where we can literally see what grid capacity is at a certain address or location to know if solar is going to work in that location. Other states like Illinois, they have those maps already, so it's real good for developers like ourselves to be able to go in and determine where we might want to take up land positions to build solar. So Ohio utilities are now going to be required to publish those maps. And so those are a few of the things that, and these are only the energy related things in those House bills. There's a whole lot of other stuff in those House bills that we did not focus on. And I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity again to share.
Well, thank you so much for broadening our perspective and giving us a lot of potential actions that we can pursue in order to generate more sustainable energy. We really, really are grateful to you, Brent. And thank you to all the participants who came tonight and your excellent questions. And also to Joey Taylor of the steering committee for managing the tech for us tonight. He's going to be recording. He has recorded this webinar and is going to post the recording, and we'll send you the link so you can see it. Brent, again, thank you for bringing both a philosophical and an experienced business person's perspective and sharing your faith and your commitment to social justice. Really, really grateful to have you. Joey says that this recording will be online tomorrow on the YouTube page of Faith Communities Go Green, and so feel free to share it with your friends. And thank you again, Brent, for coming tonight.
My pleasure, and thank you, Ariel, for the opportunity.
We'll see you all again, and have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, everyone.